Spring Boot at response body doesn't serialize entity ID. This follows the same teaching style as your earlier Spring Boot topic. Introduction. In Spring Boot REST APIs, when returning objects using response body or REST controller, Spring automatically converts Java objects into JSON using JSON. However, developers sometimes notice a strange issue. The entity ID is missing in the JSON response. Example: name, John, but expected ID 1, name, John. This can be confusing because ID exists in database entity is fetched correctly. Other fields are serialized properly. This topic helps learners understand why ID may not appear, how serialization works, common causes, how to fix it, best practices. This is a very common Spring Boot JSON issue. What does this issue mean? It means Spring JSON is not including the ID field when converting the entity to JSON. Example concept. Java object means JSON conversion, means ID field skipped. How serialization works. Spring Boot uses JSON to serialize objects. Flow. Entity means JSON means JSON response. JSON uses getters, getID, annotations visibility rules. Example concept. Field visible means included. Field hidden means excluded. Common causes. 1. Missing getter for ID. Add ID, private long ID. If there is no getter. Public long get ID. Return ID. JSON cannot serialize it. Fix public long get ID. Return ID. 2. At JSON ignore on ID. At JSON ignore private long ID. This explicitly hides the field. Fix. Remove annotation. Remove at JSON ignore 3. Using lombok incorrectly. If using lombok. At getter, at setter. But getter not generated properly or excluded, ID may not appear. Fix. Ensure. Getter. Private long ID. 4. Field visibility issue. JSON may not access private fields without getters. Fix. Add, getter, or configure. At JSON auto-detect, field visibility, JSON auto-detect, visibility any. 5. Using projections, Spring Data REST. If using projections. At projection name equals user view. Types equals user.class, and ID is not included, it won't appear. Include ID in projection. Long, get ID. 6. Lazy loading, proxy issue. Hibernate may return proxy objects. Sometimes ID may not be visible, depending on configuration. Fix. Use DTO or fetch entity properly. 7. At JSON view filtering. If using JSON view, ID may not be part of selected view. Fix. Include ID in view. 8. Custom serializer. If custom serializer is used, JSON serialize using custom serializer.class. ID may not be included. Fix. Update serializer to include ID. 9. DTO mapping issue. If you return DTO instead of entity, return new user DTO, user.getName, ID may not be included. Fix. Add ID to DTO. Private long ID. 10. Hibernate entity without proper mapping. At ID, generated value private long ID, but value not set yet, not persisted. Fix. Ensure entity is saved before returning. Example problem at entity, public class user. ID at generated value, private long ID. Private string name. Controller. Get mapping, user. Public user get user. Return user repository find by ID 1L or else. Response missing ID. Correct version. Public long get ID. Return ID. Example full working entity. Add entity. Public class user. At generated value. Private long ID. Private string name. Public long get ID. Return ID. Public string get name. Return name. Debugging tips. 1. Print object system.out.println user.getID. Check if ID exists. 2. Check JSON response. Use Postman/browser. 3. Enable logging level. Org Spring Framework equals debug. 4. Use Jackson Object Mapper. Object Mapper equals new object mapper. System.out.println. Mapper.write value as string user. Best practices include: always provide getters for fields. Use DTOs for API responses. Avoid exposing entities directly. Avoid unnecessary @JSON ignore. Use clear serialization rules. Example concept. Controlled serialization means predictable API. Advantages of fixing this: correct API responses, better front-end integration, consistent JSON structure, easier debugging. Challenges: hidden annotations, proxy issues, DTO mismatch, serialization configuration. Concepts learned in this topic: how Jackson serialization works, how ID may be missing, how common causes and fixes, best practices for REST APIs. Simple definition: ID not serialized issue, a problem where the entity's ID field is not included in the JSON response due to serialization configuration or missing accessors. Final summary: if @response body does not serialize ID, check getter exists. Check remove @JSON ignore. Check verify DTO includes ID. Check projections views. Ensure entity is persisted. Key idea: Jackson serializes only what it can access and is allowed to include. Once you understand this, you can control your API responses effectively.